topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. And we play that song, Inarticulate Speech of the Heart, because I think these conversations are rich and they come from the heart. And sometimes it's people express things that are hard to articulate. My name is Bahia Yaxan. I am a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and I've been a diversity educator for many years. If you're interested in any of my programs that are related to learning how to step out of patterns of bias that we were conditioned to, but do not actually align with our values, and we do not want to inadvertently step on toes or hurt anyone, there are ways out. We can reprogram ourselves, all your agenda, how you choose to develop new thoughts and pathways, and then make that your norm. So my website is knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com if you want to check that out. Today, I am very grateful that we have 3 veterans today who are willing to come and speak. We wish we had so much more time. We know there's so many issues that we could talk about related to this kind of incredible service and the dedication and commitment and the true sacrifices that people who serve make. I just feel forever indebted. And before I even introduce the 3 panelists, I want to dedicate this show to my cousin Bobby in his loving memory. And I'm going to read what role he played in the service. Bobby was a UH-1H helicopter pilot. I'm sorry, but tears are healing. A helicopter pilot who served 18 months in Vietnam, transporting and extracting US and Vietnamese troops into and out of hot landing zones. He had tremendous courage as he had to hover while taking heavy enemy fire. Bobby won the Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Bronze Stars for Valor, and 2 Air Medals for Valor. Thank you, Bobby. We love you. And I'm very thankful to his whole family. And full disclosure, my second cousin, who is the nephew of Bobby, is here with us today. But I'm going to introduce him last because I'm going in order of speakers. So Michelle, I'm also going to read your intro. Michelle Bailey joined the U.S. Army in 1994 after college. She flew helicopters during her time. UH-1 Hueys and OH-58Ds, I hope I'm saying this right. Kiawa, you please correct me. Warriors. She spent 8 years in the service in between the 2 Gulf Wars, and I so admire your skills. I can't even pronounce the name of the helicopters you flew. We also have Calvin Handy with us today, who joined the service in 1967. Hi, Michelle. And served in the U.S. Air Force as an Air Force security police officer, detective investigator, and team leader. He spent 1 year in Alaska and 4 years in England and retired as a staff sergeant. Calvin, also thank you to you for being here. And certainly not least, we have Richard Camille Kasem II, who spent 24 years in the U.S. Army and is retired as Lieutenant Colonel Rich Kasem. He is a retired infantry officer and a Middle East and North Africa Foreign Area officer. His last assignment was Arabian Peninsula Division Chief for the Joint Staff. In that capacity, he was advisor to the chairman of the Joint Staff, General Dunford, on military policy in the Arabian Peninsula. I so respect everything all of you did. And again, thank you so much for being here. And welcome. And I have very simple, basic questions, but honestly, the floor is yours. And you speak to where the spirit moves you. And I feel like my questions were simple because I thought we don't have a lot of time, but you know what? Sometimes 1 minute can be plenty of time. So my first question was, what motivated you, Michelle, to join?
Well, so first I want to say thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm excited, and it's an honor to share the panel with your fine, distinguished guests as well. And thank you for reading the tribute to Bobby and making me tear up right before you put me on camera. I appreciate that. As a fellow UH-1 pilot, I already feel a camaraderie towards him. So as far as why I joined, so my grandfather served 31 years in the Navy, retired 2006. And he was actually in Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. And he was also the commander of the USS Mayfield in the Korean conflict. I grew up when we were still in the midst of the Cold War. And I also grew up in a time, it feels very different from today, where there was a bigger sense of love of country. That American spirit, I feel, was a little bit stronger when I was a child. And I remember reflecting on how much I love this country, how much I appreciated the freedoms. We would see the video, or not the video feed, but, the photos coming out of the Soviet Union with people waiting in line for hours for bread. Like, it was very apparent how good we had it. And I remember thinking, we have it good because men and women were willing to die for this. And so there was that sense of, I could die like this. I'm writing a blank check to Uncle Sam, as we've all said during some time in our career. But I just felt that what we had in this country was worth my life. That there had been so much sacrifice before my time, and I was absolutely reaping everything that those men and women before me had sown, and I needed to give back. And so that was a major driving force. The other major driving force was I really wanted to fly. So there's a little bit of selfish context behind that. But I was really that all-American patriot kid. So.
Wow. Thank you so much. Really appreciate hearing that. So Calvin, what motivated you to join the service?
Well, let me also say, from the beginning, I want to kind of repeat Michelle. I want to just say how pleased I am to be here with both Michelle and Rich, and of course you, and to people who really served the country and served it well. And that's a very important thing. But I came along. I was just a college student during the Vietnam War, and so I came along when there was a draft out there. It wasn't about like signing up. You were signed up, and you had to do your very best. My father, who had served in World War II. Toward the end, he went in when he was 17. My grandmother's let him do that. But at any rate, so I was given a number of deferments, and then finally they said take the induction physical. I took that physical. I tried to think of ways to not do it, because you got to understand the context. It's not about not supporting your country. If people were landing on the shores of Cleveland or New Jersey or something like that, we're all going to go do something about them. But this war was really different. The country kind of, like started asking questions, especially young people, folks who were getting drafted. They were going like, wait a minute, they're seeing all these daily accounts of all the people who are being injured and harmed and even losing their lives. And it became a very tumultuous time. So my father said, look, we're not going to, go into the army, because if you go into the army, you're probably going to be put on some fire team out in the bush. A lot of black kids were in that scenario, and a lot of them died as a result. So my dad said, it's the Air Force or the Navy. I couldn't swim that well, so I couldn't fly either, but I joined the Air Force. And I think it was a really good decision for me in lots of different ways. I found myself a 19-year-old kid, college student. I had been wanting to be a music teacher, and now I'm humping around a KC 105, I think it was. I forget the exact name, but it was an airborne command post. I was stationed in Alaska for a year, where we were playing cat and mouse with the Russians, and then after that, I was in England for the rest of my tour and all over Europe, because we moved our fleet around depending on the weather. And I was a 19-year-old kid responsible for a $50 million aircraft in my beginning as an air police officer. Couldn't believe they made me a police officer. So at any rate, but I met people from all around the world, people from Africa, from Asia, from everywhere. And I being a 19-year-old, I made mistakes. And, we think and talk about equity and diversity and all that. Well, I'll have to tell you that I learned a lot from all of the people that I worked around, whether they were black, white, yellow, brown, whatever. I learned a lot from them. And also I was forgiven for some of the mistakes that I made. And so being a member of the United States Air Force was a major kind of change in my life, and something that I think made me a better person.
Thank you so much, Calvin. And I think that's amazing that your father was just paying that much attention and had a major influence.
He did.
And at a pivotal time for a very valid reason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, what I liked is that he didn't, it never even occurred to me that I wouldn't serve. That was going to happen. It was just, how are we going to do this and why? And so I'm glad he was there for me.
Yes, me too. So, Rich, what motivated you to serve?
Well, Bahia, I want to thank you for having me on the program. And I can't remember the last time I was out to California. It's been so long to visit with all my relatives. But thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here with Calvin and Michelle. And especially thank you for dedicating this program today to Uncle Bobby. That's very meaningful. And I can't even tell you how much that means to my father. We're all honored that you chose to do that. So, my paternal grandparents immigrated to the United States from Lebanon. My grandmother came over here. My grandfather, Sammy Qasim, came over between the world wars. And then my grandmother came over separately before the two of them even met from Lebanon on a boat, that took a month to get here after World War II. And they met in the United States. So I am acutely aware of, how lucky I am to be an American citizen at all. Different circumstances could have led to many, many other outcomes. And I know how much better, having spent so many years in the Middle East, how lucky we are to live the way we do in the United States. And so I grew up with that knowledge in the background of my head. I mean, I was a child. I didn't really ponder it very, very seriously, but I knew that I was lucky to be in the U.S. And I grew up, my brother Christopher and I grew up in a family with a history of military service. Both of my grandfathers served in World War II. And my father and, of course, my Uncle Bobby, so my father Richard and my Uncle Bobby served in Vietnam. So my brother Chris and I, we grew up living on military installations. And in fact, I think we probably didn't realize that there were Americans who were not veterans. Everybody we knew was a vet. And our parents brought us up with an appreciation for patriotism and military service. Like all young people, I had aspirations of growing up to be a famous musician or an astronaut, But when I got my head out of the clouds, I realized that I could match my desire to serve in the military with my desire to finance my college education. And so I applied for and received an Army ROTC scholarship. And just a few years in, I think 4 years into my service, they were paying people lump sums, I think $32,000 to get out. They were downsizing. And I guess I used a little bit of reverse psychology on the Army. And I said, well, if everybody's getting out, then maybe if I stay in, I might get promoted to major, and who knows? And so I did. I stayed in and made a career of it. So.
Thank you so much. I hear an underlying theme of not taking life in America for granted,
Sure.
and I'll just share one reason I appreciate so much the sacrifices that you all made, even though it is a different kind of service. I spent 3 years in the U.S. Peace Corps serving because I too felt a call to serve, and with a totally different focus, it would strike me at times when I was working in Nepal, how different it would be if my aim was to, Calvin and I were talking about this the other day, like search and destroy, if that was what I was trained to do. That came to me really strongly one time when I was planting rice in a rice field with some people. And the other thing I want to say is just from that little experience of 3 years, I have a sense of how hard it is to be away from home, to be so far away and so long and so disconnected, like long before there was email or internet, all that stuff. So I think that's why I like just am perpetually impressed by, the sacrifices you all made. And thanks for letting me be so informal and call you by your first names. I really appreciate that. So I think that the sort of the next arena of I wanted to ask about was, and I'm sure it's hard to pinpoint one, but what was like your greatest learning, or it could be like, every year there was something else, but what are some of the kind of most powerful lessons that you took away, or gifts that you want to add to what you began to already share? Michelle?
Okay, so I realized I was remiss. We do have a panel of Air Force and Army, but I do want to wish a very happy birthday to all my Marine Corps brethren as well, because today's the Marine Corps birthday. So wanted to throw that one out there for all the devil dogs. Wow. So as far as like the greatest learning, I just think perseverance, the ability to deal with stuff upon stuff upon stuff, the ability to be flexible, to be able to change really on a moment's notice. I mean, some of it was almost comical, hey, go put on this uniform, and we go put on this uniform, and they're like, never mind, go put on that uniform. And just some of the crazy stuff, and you just learn to deal with that level of stress till it's not really stressful. I've run into people and they're like, and this isn't to say anything about other people's jobs. I understand stress is different, but I've had people tell me like how stressed out they are. And I'm like, really? In your air conditioned office with nobody shooting at you? Okay. again, that's not to say anything about somebody's job, but you just learn a completely different perspective on what's really stressful, what's really important, what do I actually have to do today compared to what do I want to do today. Um, you were talking about the Peace Corps. I've done some mission work over in Nicaragua, and it's interesting because, people get like, the water there's no hot water, it's so cold. I'm like, yeah, but there's water. I mean, I've taken a shower with a canteen before, as I'm sure the two gentlemen on the screen with me know exactly what I'm talking about, or maybe a lukewarm Lister bag. You learn that, at the end of the day, you're going to be okay. It's just a different perspective and a level of perseverance that I don't think I ever really appreciated before. Some of them weren't the best lessons in the world, but you know what? I can go to the bathroom anywhere I need to go now. I don't have any issues. Like, you learn to deal with it as you go. And yeah, so I would just say just the overall perseverance, overall perspective on life and stress and what you can and cannot actually deal with.
Wow. Thank you so much. What a great description.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. How about you, Calvin?
Well, first thing I should say to Michelle and to Rich is that I was in the Air Force, so it's whether that was really the military. I never did anything with the canteen, but I think that what happened for me in my life, in my young life, and after I became a member of the United States Air Force, is that I was in no way, no how, even remotely thinking about a career in the United States military, nor was I thinking about what I did became. I became a peace officer here in California, and later on in my career, a chief of police. And I can tell you that what for me, what this great life is about for me is that you can be well adjusted and focused on something that you want to happen in your life, and then because of the need of your country or your family or yourself or whatever, suddenly you can be faced with something that you absolutely never thought of. So when I joined the Air Force, and after basic training, I was put in a program called Casuals because they hadn't figured out what they were going to do with me yet. And then they came through the barracks one day and said, "Everybody in here is a cop." And I'm going, well, no, not me, So I went through the police academy and the Air Force and graduated #1 and all that. And I made a career of it because that was what I had left, because my other pursuit had just disappeared for lots of reasons that I won't get into here. And so what I think the military and what my life has been about is that, dealing with change, dealing with that what you want to have happen in your life, and then what the realities are, and finding a way to make it still work for you. And I feel as though that's what happened to me. And I have not one shred of bitterness or anything like that about it. I just had to go through what I had to go through. And I believe that there was a reason for it. And I'm actually glad that I did. I met some people that I learned from, and all of that. And so it helped me mature as a person, and helped me deal with the fact that all of a sudden everything can change on you. And the military was good for me.
Wow. Thank you. I could feel that, like immediate adaptability, shift. Be present, show up. Thank you, Calvin. Well, what are you thinking, Rich? What do you think?
Well, the greatest lesson that I learned from being in the Army is cultural awareness. Not the Army itself is a diverse organization, but also I spent most of my career living and working in the Middle East. And not only are cultural groups different from one another, but no two people are alike. And to lead people effectively, you have to know them. You have to know what makes them tick, how they think, um, and that makes leadership an intensely personal interaction between human beings. So I think the greatest lesson I took away was cultural awareness, and I tried to employ that in my work as a foreign area officer. You make a lot of strides when you learn somebody's language. They pay more attention to you than if you speak to them in English. So it's those little things. Just on a big scale, on an international scale, trying to learn other people's languages, trying to learn their cultures, what's important to them. But also on a personal level, just trying to get to know my soldiers and what was important to them, and how they think and how they behave, and I think that hopefully that made me a better leader.
No doubt. I love the way you described leadership. Tell me if I have it right. You say leadership in like intensely personal interaction, like just that is such a great description.
Thank you.
And how motivating that would be for me, if you were leading me.
And I tried to continue to do that today. Hopefully I do a good job. You'd have to ask my cadets, my JROTC cadets, but I'm not from Sunbury, Pennsylvania. They are. I come from a different socioeconomic background than they do. I come from a different heritage than they do. I have a different political views than many of them do. But to do my job, to teach them effectively, to lead them, I have to understand them. And so I do my best to do that to this day. But I learned that by being in the Army. I learned that lesson in the Army. So
that is wonderful to hear, that sort of like the component of like empathy and compassion and identifying and validating different perspectives and accepting. And thank you for mentioning the diversity. I did try to reach other veterans, and I have countless shows on different veterans' perspectives, right, and from different demographic groups. And I was looking up statistics for how this country breaks down groups of people by race, what we call race, and some like there was not even a category that I could find, and my research was not extensive. I could find it, I'm sure, with more time, but there was not even, it was like and other. There were like 6% and other, and indigenous people from indigenous communities weren't mentioned. And we have so many different people from different, Asian and Pacific Asian heritages. But I think that's, I'm sure, one thing that makes us so strong is all of our diversity. And I did, go ahead.
But yeah, I just wanted, you used the word compassion, and since we're talking about leadership and you used the word compassion, it reminded me of the last line of the senior ROTC Cadet Creed, which is, "May God give me the compassion and judgment to lead, and the gallantry in battle to win." So, so apparently we're on to something there, because other people before us have put compassion and leadership together in the same sentence. So.
Thank you for that. I do want to mention, I did learn that Canada does have an Indigenous Veterans Day to honor Indigenous veterans on November 8th. So Michelle, what would you say was, whatever you're willing to share, like the most difficult or the most challenging?
So just a couple prefaces before I start. One, Rich, I wish you had been my commander when I was in, and I may have a very different answer for where I'm going. Keeping in mind that the community in which I served in was, it was brand new to women. I was one of the first And to answer your question from earlier, it's Kiowa Warrior. All Army helicopters are named after indigenous tribes in the United States. So Kiowa Warrior was the helicopter I flew. I was one of the very first women to be in that particular airframe. It was an armed reconnaissance helicopter. And it was right at the time where they were letting women in combat, but not really, because that didn't really come about officially for a couple decades later. But, you know, women had been on the ground in the first Gulf War. So I came in and I was flying in a very old boys club. And there were plenty of those old boys that did not want me there. And they were very vocal about not wanting me there. When I joined, I thought I was going to do 20 years. I wanted to be the first female in the 160th, which is the elite special forces helicopter unit that the Army has. I wanted to be one of the very few CW5s that a female achieved. I wouldn't have been the first, but it's a small rank regardless of gender, but it would have been a smaller rank as a woman. So that was my goal. Like I thought, I'm going to shatter this glass ceiling and I'm going to be, you know, this spearhead and I'm going to, you know, prove that women can do everything a man can do. I grew up here in Davis. I was very active in Civil Air Patrol, which is the Air Force Auxiliary. I went through college. Never once had I been judged on anything other than my ability. Whatever that ability, whatever the test was, that was the only thing I was ever judged on. And so all of a sudden I step into the units, and even in flight school, basic training, warrant officer school is different. Flight school, I didn't really notice it. When I got to my first unit, the instructor pilot I was flying with, very first day, we go out, we buckle into the aircraft, and he looks at me and says, "Women shouldn't be in the cav. Now let's go fly." Like that was the first instructor pilot that I flew with in an active duty unit. Unfortunately, he wasn't a minority per se. And that's not to say that's how every man treated me. There were plenty of good men I served with, and there were a lot of men who actually reversed their thoughts on female helicopter pilots after they met me and flew with me. But it turned out my ability to be the spearhead and break that glass ceiling I didn't have the ability I thought. I didn't have the strength that I thought I had to do that. Wasn't strong enough. I couldn't do it. And when I got to my time served, I left. I was sad. I wanted to fly since I was, 3. I was living my dream. I mean, flying helicopters is awesome. Like, people thank me for my service. I'm like, are you kidding me? I had the greatest job ever. And I could tell you stories all day long. So that was disappointing for me. And it's really hard to see this now, 20, 25 years later, that women are still having these difficulties. There's a woman who has a lawsuit down in Orange County. She's flown for 30 years and they're trying to say she's not a fit helicopter pilot because it's an all boys club. And so that kind of stuff is still frustrating to me. Mm-hmm. Again, I think with the right leadership, and I know there's plenty of women that served in different capacities. So keeping that in mind, that I was in a very elite circle that had just opened to women. But that was the hardest part for me. Like, I really wanted to do 20 years. I wanted to wear the uniform. I wanted to serve. I wanted to get all those flight hours. And I didn't.
That can really wear you down. It's very understandable. It takes support. I'm sorry that happened, Because
Well, and I was the only woman. Like there wasn't anyone else. Towards the end, before I got out, there was another woman that came into my unit. But I mean, it's not like there was, and I did have wonderful male counterparts. Please don't think that they were all terrible. I had plenty of great counterparts, but some of the leadership, not so much.
Thank you so much for being willing to share all that, Michelle. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Calvin, what would you say was the most challenging part for you, or the most difficult?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say to Michelle, just really seriously, thank you for your service. But for me, it was, and I just kind of touched on it a little bit, and I'll try to be brief with this. But at the time, in the 66, 67, when the Vietnam War was developing, I had graduated from high school. I had received a whole basket load of full ride music scholarships. I wanted to be a music teacher, and but I was raised by my grandparents, and so after graduating high school, my grandfather sent me from Shreveport, Louisiana, which is where I grew up, to the Bay Area, to Richmond, California, to be with my dad, who I knew, but I didn't really know, kind of thing. And so it was the most difficult thing that ever happened to me. Everything that I've been working for since junior high school was gone, just like this. And so, and then in its place, all of a sudden, I'm in this strange place. I don't know anybody. And then I, start working and still playing around music, has some success. And then next thing you know, I'm in the military. And so I'm already dealing with something that, it took me a long time to get over it. But then I think all of a sudden to suddenly be, you're on a bus, you're down to the induction center, you reach the base you're going to be working on. They cut off all your hair. I woke up the first morning. I woke up in the Air Force. The guy was throwing a trash can down the middle of the bay. I've never seen anything like that, right? And so I'm going like, what am I doing here? I mean, it was scary, but not frightening, but it was scary. I was like 19. And so, it was this double whammy for me. And I was able to, but because of meeting so many, particularly the veteran, whether they were sergeants or officers or whatever they were, the NCOs and officers, I just met a lot of people in the Air Force that were willing to help you out and help you through your mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes if you're a 19-year-old naive man, like a young man like I was. You're going to make mistakes. And so I had lots of people, black people, as I said before, white people, Asian people, Indian people, Latino people, from all different places. So some of them are really kicking your butt, saying, hey, what's the matter with you? But others are ensuring that you learn from your mistakes. And I have that to them because that's where I grew up. I grew up in the Air Force, and I was able to move on in my life and learn from the mistakes that I'd made in my life. I didn't do anything super heinous, but just you make mistakes, And when you're in the Air Force, you're making mistakes. Somebody's going to make sure you know about it. so I knew about some things, but yet I have what I believe that never expected to have the kind of life that I have now, and the success I've had, and my family's in good shape. And so the good part about the Air Force was, when I came out of the Air Force looking what to do, clearly, they had to be looking at maybe being a peace officer. And of course, the GI Bill helped me and my family, helped me with I had to go back to college to finish college and all of that, because I was a member of the American military, and I was proud of it. One of my greatest delights, I'll just change it a little bit, was I got a chance to go to Normandy and Brittany in France, where they, when they were VJ Day, and VE Day, and I was able to, be a part of a rifle team that, did the honors at these places and met the people who had been through these trials and tribulations, and I was so proud, and I continue to be proud of my experience, although. I came at it through a kind of a difficult way, but I'm glad that the military was there for me.
thank you so much for describing the background that was hard before
It's
you.
really hard. Yeah,
Well, thank you, Calvin.
sure.
So, Rich, what did you want to share about what was most challenging for you, or the biggest learning? I mean, what your
Okay,
most
yeah,
challenging?
the biggest challenge, right? So I want to start by hopefully reassuring Michelle a little bit. I want you to know, Michelle, that that half of we have 60 cadets, 62 cadets here. Half of them are female cadets, and so hopefully we're on a turn. To an even more diverse workforce in the military. Not only that, but our commander, our second in command, and two of our three company commanders are female cadets. So hopefully we're making a turnaround there. And Calvin, I want you to know that I'm still making mistakes. I get called down to the principal's office at least once every day. So don't feel bad. But my biggest challenge, the biggest challenge for me was attending the memorial services after returning from deployment.
Mm-hmm.
In the heat of combat, there's not much time to think about or mourn the dead. And so that all sort of piles up. And then when you return from deployment and go to the memorial services, and it really hits home. You start asking yourself questions like, why did God allow me to survive and not my battle buddy or my friend? And it's not just the friendly forces, but even the enemy. I know this is my turn to try not to get choked up, Bahia. But I know that every time, I had my finger on the trigger, I was saying a prayer that, please God, make this guy who's running toward me trip and fall or get scared and turn around and run away, so that I don't have to shoot. Because if I do shoot, I'm going to aim at the center of mass of the target. But please God, let the bullet hit an arm or a leg, let him live. And I remember coming back and going through the psychological evaluations that everybody goes through when they come back. And the psychologist asked me a question, something like, have you had any thoughts about death and killing? And I sort of looked at him sideways and said, yes, every minute of every day for the past 15 months, but it's not an altogether crazy question. I think we just needed to reword the question. I think the question should be, how can we help you deal with your thoughts of killing and death?
Mm-hmm.
Because those thoughts, if left unaddressed, are what lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, and those are the thoughts that lead people down the path of suicide, and those do need to be addressed. I think we're more aware of that now than we were, 10 years ago, 20, 15 years ago. And so, I hope that that the military continues to improve in terms of treating people mentally, as well as improving in terms of diversity in the workforce and having men and women work together side by side in combat. So.
Wow, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I so appreciate that. I think it's really helps all of us by your sharing the vulnerability and the pain and the prayer that you made. And of course, I too would be thinking about death and killing constantly if that was in my training. And I so want to reinforce your point of mental health support. Physical and mental health support are so still lacking and not there enough. And thank you for raising the issue of suicide of vets, because it's so incredibly tragic. And I also really hope to help prevent that from anyone feeling the need to do that. I see we only have 1 minute left. The time has flown by. I want to give you each just a word, your final word, and I'm so sorry that this is almost over. And then I'll just thank my people when you're done, and come back sometime. Michelle.
So, Rich, absolutely so glad you brought it up. 22 veterans a day take their own lives. Absolutely, suicide prevention needs to be on the forefront of what's happening. Thank you for bringing that up, Rich.
Thank you.
And I would just say that I thank Rich and Marilyn. Thank you both for your service. I really mean that. And Bahia, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this. I've enjoyed it very much, and I've learned. And just keep it up.
Rich.
Just, I'm lucky. I came back with all my limbs and faculties, but other people weren't as lucky. Some were wounded, some died. So let's not let their memories die with them. Let's keep their memories alive.
Amen.
You're here.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you so much. Thank each of you very much again. Thank you to our sound engineer, Roxy, our producer, Dean. Thank you to all the listeners. And let's find ways to support vets. I know we can. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. on W4CY for radio, or Talk 4 TV to view live next Wednesday at 8 p.m. And again, my gratitude and thank you to all vets.
Thank you,
for
Bahia.
having us.
Thank you.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech.